The sword was really small, the spear was used for throwing, and the bow was used for long range attacks. The Bowie knife is roughly the same size as a sword, and you have modern day bows which are very similar to a Roman bow, and you have javelins used in the Olympics. They'd use the sword for cutting meat off animals they've killed, so they could cook it. They'd use the bow for killing the animals, and the spear if the animal got a bit too close. The Celts were angry because the Romans came here and started forcing their laws upon them, and started giving them orders and making them work for the Roman emperors. So the Celts didn't like that, so they decided to fight back instead of work.
I chose this object because I'm interested in weapons what Romans used. The Romans' weapons are far different from the weapons we use today. In the Roman time, they didn't have any guns. They used bows and arrows, swords and spears. The weapons was used for war training and gladiator fights.
Hello, my name is Chris Edwards and I formerly lived in Caerleon. I don't live very far away now, and I've been to the museum many times. And one thing that has always caught my eye is the collection of objects that were found in the drain from the baths, which clearly were things that people lost while swimming or bathing and were washed into the drain and then found really quite recently, 1979 I believe. So first of all, there are jewels, and some of those are semi-precious stones for the most part, some of them the same sort of stones that we would use today, jasper, amethyst, cornelian, that sort of thing. But even more intriguing for me were the children's milk teeth, which gave incontrovertible evidence, or provided incontrovertible evidence, that women and children used the baths as well as soldiers. Now, to me, this is fascinating. I did Latin at school and resisted doing A-level Latin partly because I was sick of the fighting. They were always throwing up ramparts and digging ditches.
Yes.
It was all about men, okay?
Yes.
All about men. And when you come to the museum, beautifully laid up, there's a barrack room, men again, models of centurions and other legionaries and so forth. And here was a glimpse of family life. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't all for the men. And the idea of the Roman baths being used not just for the men, but a sort of leisure centre for the family was a very attractive one. Now I understand that it was only officers' wives, centurions and above, who would be allowed to take the family there. But even so, it gives a new slant on the military life of the Roman period. So that's why I like it. Particularly the teeth, the children losing their teeth and not getting any money from the tooth fairy.
I chose the money because I find it really interesting and the history is interesting too. And I find there is connections between our money and the old money, because there is a queen on ours, they had like an empire on ours, and where we have tails, and they do. I think the connections on it represent the Roman history and empire. So I think the objects were used for buying food and to have wages for when they was working.
My name's Evan Dodd and I'm talking about the Roman gemstones. The reason I chose this particular object is because it's attractive, eye-catching, and makes you wonder where it came from and how much it would cost to buy now and back in the Roman days. I feel that the people who would have used the gems would have been loaded, and they would have a job such as soldiers, and soldiers would have wanted to show off the decorations. They would have felt important. I think the gems were used in the Roman times to show off. Everyone wanted to have some. Sometimes they were given as a gift or even trade in wine, food and animals. Today you would find gems in rings, necklaces, bracelets, and even used on mobile phone covers and nails art.
I wouldn't like Roman foods because they used to eat oysters. My favourite food is pizza and chips. They had no tomatoes and no potatoes.
Have you ever stamped your bread with your name on it?
No, I haven't. But if it took me hours to make the bread like it did for the Romans, I would put my name on it. Because like today, you can't just pop down to Asda's and buy some bread.
Why did you choose this object?
Because I like food and I also took catering because I like cooking. Why did you choose the object?
I like cooking with my mum.
Latin language, because I think is interesting. The differences between what we're like now to then is because they wrote on wood and we write on paper. They used to write on wood for shopping lists, letters, and in the wars to order someone. The Latin language is spoken in types of different languages across Europe, and some of the words are from Latin. We write shopping lists now on paper.
My name is Joan Edwards. I've lived in Caerleon for many years, originally from the Swansea area, but it's always intrigued me that Caerleon is such an important base for Rome. I've always been quite intrigued by this particular tombstone of the man with his hand presumably on the head of his son, found again in Little Bulmore, which was quite an area of burials for outside the fortress. I've become quite emotional looking at it because, despite of the erosion, there seems to be an expression on the man's face which suggests profound grief in a way, and I feel if we could see it as it was originally, that would become very dominant, the theme. And obviously someone quite affluent to be able to have this type of memorial in Bath stone. So to me it is quite outstanding really in the museum.
My name is Penny Minton. I live in Caerleon. Whenever I go to a museum, I'm usually attracted to everyday objects, and the one I saw here is a mould-blown bottle with a square base, and on the base there are 4 raised corners forming feet so that the bottle can stand upright. And on the bottom there is a moulded circle which has an inscription in raised letters which says Cressimus fecit, Cressimus made this. This is probably the name of the company or the business who were manufacturing these bottles. And I thought this was very interesting because it brings this object into the modern day era. It connects my way of life to his, that advertising pays, and businesses even then were thinking that. And I was also very interested by the mere fact that we still had this glass bottle, although it's put together in pieces, but it's still here after nearly 2,000 years. And I just find the whole thing very interesting that their life wasn't, in some aspects, so different from ours.
I chose pots, jewellery and gems and mosaics. I chose a variety of objects because I can choose which object that I really wanted to talk about. So I chose the variety of things that were very interesting. I think the Romans got used similar to the objects we use today because they used to love making themselves pretty and making themselves up. For example, using hair clips and hanging with friends. I think the objects are similar today by they used pots for the cooking and drink, and we use pots for the same thing. I think the variety of things are used for the pots was for food and drink especially, and the gems were used for to make the jewellery, and mosaic was used for walls and floors to decorate them. I got a mosaic in my bathroom. I made a vase
and a couple of plates. My mum bought a like a plate thing, and it was mosaic and pottery together.
I'm Zach Smart from Blackwood Comprehensive School, and I'm going to be talking about transport.
I chose this object because I am interested in transport, and I would be interested to find out what transport was like then in the Roman times. I think the objects were used for travelling long distances and delivering resources. I have interested in the parts of a chariot. They were powered by horse.